Alright, so a month in Unreal. If you watched my other video, then you know that I started in Unreal. And after my Godot project, I felt kind of burnt out. And one thing that I wanted to make sure that I stayed on top of is making sure that I always had fun. So anytime that I just feel burnt out or I just don't want to do it anymore, I want to just stop and find something else to do. So after like a week and a half of focusing on like anything else, I started to have that itch to want to do it again. And this time, I decided to go back to Unreal. But in order to keep my morale high, I decided to start with stuff that I felt comfortable with. And what I felt the most comfortable with was world or scene building. So I spent a few days doing what felt like playing The Sims. After those few days and getting comfortable with the workflow, I decided to add some weapons. I found some weapon models on Sketchfab and then I rigged and animated them in Blender. And I added those to a weapon system that I made after watching this tutorial. I added sound, particle effects, and align trace to the weapons. And then I added an aim animation that even slowed down the walk speed while aiming. Next, I added the crosshair and some UI widgets. I made a widget that pops up when you're near weapons to tell you that you can pick them up. Then I basically duplicated that to make an interaction widget. Also, I made it where you can get in and out of a car and drive the car. And I also made doors that you can open and close and lights that you can turn on and off. So I eventually put the interaction widget on all of these things. I also made a motion light just because I thought it was cool and I realized that I could after I made the interaction widgets. I also added a whole bunch of street lights too. And because I was using Unreal Engine's stock car or whatever you call it, I wanted to put my own car in there. So I did that next. I also rigged that in Blender, but there's a plugin for that. I'll leave the link below if you guys want to check that out. And there are some tutorials for this, but I really had to figure this out on my own. Like tutorials for rigging cars, yes, but finding one to actually get the controls down and responsive, like, man. But now that I'm thinking about it, this isn't just an issue for cars that you want to add to rig. This is also an issue for the cars that are already default in Unreal. And I don't know if it was because I was already using a third person template, but I had to like manually add every input action to the blueprint of the vehicle. So I had to do that for the default car and also the car that I added later on. But once I got the new car's controls down, I wanted to make it where I could get in and out of that car too. So then I did some more scene building, and after that I also added the interaction widget to this car. Then I did some more scene building because why not have a gas station if we have a car? And as I was doing scene building and adding more lights, I started to think, you know what would be really easy? Be really easy to add some headlights and some brake lights to my car. So that's what I did. So I made it so where when I pressed on the brakes, the brake light lit up, and when I let it go, it went off. Then I added an L key press on a flip-flop, so when I press L, my lights will either go on or off. Next, I worked on AI, and now I'm talking about this, I realized I just did this any type of way I wanted to. But like I said, I was trying to have fun. But I made a simple AI behavior tree, and at first I wanted it to be like a zombie, cause like why not? I really in my mind was like that has to be the easiest AI enemy you can make. I ended up changing the walking animation and stuff just because I didn't really like how it looked. I kept trying to tweak it and I just never could get it right. It was always either like stuttering or just looked like it was sliding across the floor. After I got the enemy's patrol and chase state down, I wanted to work on the enemy's attack. And after I got the enemy to attack, once it reached the player, I wanted to work on the damage. I actually worked on the player damaging the enemy first because I already had it drawing the line trace anyway. And I did realize in this instance, you can basically use the same code for both the enemy and the player to take damage. After making the enemy take damage, I made it where it ragdolls after health is depleted and then disappears. Then I added the same logic without the destroy actor to my third person character, and that worked perfectly. But once I got rid of the balloon effect, it looked something like this. Next, I added logic where the enemy respawns in a random radius after being destroyed, which made it look something like this. Next, I added a health bar widget, and the problem that I had that I could not fix is that I can make the widget pop up whenever I started taking damage, or I could press a button and then make it pop up, but I could not make it pop up when using event begin play. So I just settled for it popping up whenever I take damage. And then I worked on some of my third person character movements. I added a random idle sequencer, added a blend space and a crouch blend space. Also added aim offset so the character and the gun moves up and down with the camera. I also added a damage indicator to the enemy. And then I wanted to add blood. And for some reason particle effects aren't cheap. Like I didn't even find one for free. So I found a tutorial to make my own. Which the tutorial was kind of out of date, so it helped me in the beginning, but not really at the end. And plus it used programs that I don't even use, but it did introduce me to a program that I think I'm going to use a lot more in the future, because in order for me to make this I had to have a normal map, and this is the only program I've found that you can upload a picture and it would create textures for you. I believe the program's called Shader Map. After finishing the blood, I added random attack and damage animations to the enemy. Then for a second, I was pretty much just tweaking, getting the animations to line up with the blood splatters. Next, I added random animation for the player's damage, so when the player takes damage, it'll play a different animation. So I tried to change the default skin on the enemy because, like, why not, right? And I messed up the whole skeleton. So then I had to fix that. It took me a minute to figure it out, but I just had to use another skeleton and then retarget all the animations. Next, I did something that I was actually trying to figure out for a while, which was add holsters for the weapons. And the way I did it is a good example of just because it works doesn't mean it's right. Because if you see, whenever I pick up the weapons, it doesn't automatically go to that holster. But if I start to switch weapons, then it will go to the holster, but it works, so whatever. I still had to figure out how to change the enemy's mannequin. I found out the best way to do that was by retargeting the Anim blueprint. I ran into an issue where Unreal kept crashing every time I was trying to retarget mine, and I think it was because how much I had already changed the Anim blueprint. I opened a new project to test this, and it worked perfectly besides the fall land doing this. So I decided to replace the mannequin with a metahuman, since I already did that with the third person character. Then I put a police vest, some glasses, and a hat that I got off of Sketchfab onto the metahuman. So the enemy has went from a mannequin zombie to a security guard that can't land to a metahuman with police clothes on. You got light switches, motion lights, a gas station across from my house, and a car. And you're probably wondering what the story is behind all this. There isn't one, just straight up mechanics, my boy.